Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Cindy Chavez here. Today is Wednesday, September the 26th, 2018, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, your first daily dose of happy for the day. And I have to say, Cindy, we're off to a very happy start here because today is Louise's and my wedding anniversary. So it's a happy day for us. Yeah,
yay, happy anniversary.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
How wonderful.
Yeah, so that gets the day off to a great start all by itself right there.
Yes, it does. That's wonderful. I love anniversaries.
Yeah, yeah. So how are you doing? I mean, anything momentous happened since 24 hours ago?
No, nothing really momentous has happened for the last 24 hours, and that's probably good news.
Probably, yeah, right.
No, everything's going well here. We're still having that weird weather where it keeps saying we're going to get rain and then we get just a little sprinkle. So,
right.
I keep feeling like, because this time of year with hurricane season and everything, so we've got one eye on the storm systems, but not much going on here in the way of anything momentous. That would be it. If we found out there was a hurricane.
That would be definitely momentous. Yes. That's the momentum we
well,
want.
Hopefully
we
not.
Don't want.
Sometimes it fizzles out and that's what you always want. So.
Yes, that's right. Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like that reverse momentum, right? We don't want that momentum.
Right. We always talk about momentum when we talk about law of attraction. That's certainly not the kind of momentum that we want to drum up as hurricanes and any kind of momentous weather.
So we're going to shift it around and celebrate the idea of beautiful weather coming through so that you don't even have to deal with the little drizzles. It's like, blue sky and the sun and all the comfortable temperatures and so forth. So you can really enjoy your fall. That's the way it should be.
I agree with that. I love that. One thing about the fall here, and I'm down in the southern part of the United States in southern Louisiana, and it's very, very humid. And I grew up in California where there was no humidity.
Right.
And it's really funny because there'll be usually anyway, the past couple of years, the weather's been kind of wonky, but usually in October, there'll be at least a week, maybe 10 days where the humidity just sort of disappears and the temperature, of course, is starting to cool off just a little bit. And it just feels exactly like what I remember most of my days growing up feeling like.
Mm-hmm. That must make for an interesting weather forecast, though. Today's forecast, wonky. Continued mostly wonky.
Well, it's weird. Like most of the time where I grew up in central part of California in the Bay Area, the weather was very temperate. It wasn't freezing and it wasn't roasting. It was, most of the time. And, I always joke that's why real estate's so expensive there, but part of it.
Not entirely a joke. It's actually largely true.
Right. So it's just really beautiful weather. And it's weird how I've been here, for 30 years and yet still when the weather is like that, I immediately am taken back to my growing up years in California. It just feels like that to me. And that's, we've been talking about yesterday, we read some Neville Goddard and we've been talking about assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled.
The wish fulfilled.
Whatever it is that we're wishing for, whatever it is we want to create consciously, that this is part of how we do it, is to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled already. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
before you go any further, because I know you're going to get into really good stuff here, but I want to do something new going forward here for some period of time. I don't know, maybe a week or two. We always do our promo messages toward the end of the show, and I want to get them in at the beginning because I'm realizing that's when I have the best attention of the listener. So I'm going to do an abbreviated version of our two promo messages to start the show off today. First one, if you're not yet a subscriber, please become a subscriber. And it's real simple to do. The instructions are on the homepage at loatoday.net. So if this is one of the first episodes you're listening to, subscribe because that way you can get not just this one, but all of the episodes coming through to your smartphone or other device. Also, if you are currently a subscriber and are part of our program, or even if you're not yet part of our program of trying to do more outreach by posting about the fact that you're listening to loatoday.net on your favorite social media channels, that's been working a lot. I mean, we've been having major growth in terms of the number of people finding out about the program, and that's what we're trying to do. We want more and more people to get their daily dose of happy. So we want to urge you, please take a moment and say, I'm listening to loatoday.net, and let people know about it. And the amazing thing, well, I guess it shouldn't be amazing to us because we're all followers of the law of attraction, but the amazing thing is you put it out there and people you have no idea about find it. And you become a part of that, which is really cool. I still don't always know how the law of attraction does that, but it does. It finds a way to get the message into the right person's hands at the time that they need it most. And that's really the ideal listener. So please take a moment to subscribe if you're not yet a subscriber, and please share the fact that you're listening with other people so that they can find out about LOA Today and get their daily dose of happy as well. So back to you, Cindie.
Perfect. Well, it's interesting. You were talking about how does that happen? Right?
Yeah.
People that you didn't even, and I'm thinking about, well, we're talking about assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled. And the thing that's amazing about that is it allows us to completely skip over the entire question and confusion and, consideration of how. I mean, to me, that's one thing that trips up a lot of us as we go make a goal or a wish or we have a desire and we're deciding. The first question usually is, okay, how? Yeah. How do I get this to come to pass?
And right? When you say the word how, the first person that comes to my mind is Mike Dooley, who talks about the horrible hows.
Right.
That's his way of characterizing the fact that you don't want to ask how. You don't want to go there because all you do is get yourself into a bad feeling place.
Those are the two questions that come up, and they're really just sort of one question, but those are the two questions that always come up, it seems like, is how is this going to happen? How do I get this? And what do I do? Like, what do I do? How is this going to happen? And, of course, the bigger the goal seems to us, completely contrary to what Abraham says, that it's just as easy to create a castle as a button.
Mm-hmm.
Still, most of the time, they say that because we have an issue with that, right? We think if we want to create something that feels really big to us, then it seems harder and more difficult. And how is it going to happen? We ask all these questions. And if we would just allow ourselves to skip over all of that and go right to assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled, that would remedy all of that confusion.
It would.
In fact, worry and concern about how it's going to happen.
In fact, after yesterday afternoon's podcast with Wendy Dillard, Wendy and I were chatting. At one point, I was talking to her about her method that she uses whenever she's connecting inside, getting all these wonderful messages. She's really good at it. And she made a suggestion to me that was a really good one. I liked her suggestion. It was basically take 3 long, slow breaths and make each breath for the purpose of relaxation. So you get yourself into a really relaxed place. And then ask your question and then listen. And I said, well, that sounds like a good idea. I'll give that a shot. So a little later on in the day, or in the evening actually, I went into the bedroom, sat down on the bed, and just got myself into that relaxed place actually I did more than 3 deep breaths. I did 4 or 5 of them. And then when I felt like I was ready, I put my question out. Now, my question was, I want more and more people to find out about LOA Today. So how can we get to the point where, say, 10,000 people are playing each episode? What do I have to do? And I actually got an answer, which is rare for me. I get an answer about 1 out of every 10 times. So I was really pleased I got an answer. What I was not pleased with was what the answer was, because the answer was nothing.
I was like, I'm listening to your story. I'm like, that question is, what do I have to do?
Exactly. Right, and it came back nothing. I was like, well, what am I supposed to do then? I mean, I do nothing? But then I realized, of course, that's the answer, and yet, here I am doing a podcast with you and all these other co-hosts, and we're saying the same thing over and over again. And then I go to do it in my private life, and what do? I start doing the horrible house. I mean, like, oh God.
Exactly. We all do it. Well, something stood out to me, and I wanted to touch on it before we sort of jump way ahead into the middle of the next chapter. But there was a discussion yesterday between us about Neville and about how often he uses verses from the New Testament, from the Christian Bible, which may be really exciting to some people and may completely turn other people off. It just depends on what your own personal beliefs are. But I read something when I was going through this, and I thought it just hit me again. And we probably talked about it yesterday, but it stood out to me. And that is when we were talking yesterday about the whole idea that Neville brings up of forgiveness of sin. We had to be really careful to explain what he's talking about, because what he's talking about in the original language, that phrase sin in those verses just means to miss the mark. And so forgiveness is to create, to make it right, to hit the mark.
Okay.
So we're not talking about me forgiving someone of their grievances or their sins or whatever. We're just talking about missing the mark and hitting the mark. And so if we've missed the mark, we want to kind of do a do-over. We want to know, what do we do to hit the mark, right? To make it right. And the thing that I read yesterday, after we'd finished, and we also read it during the show, but it was just this one line, and it was, without the identification of man with his aim, the forgiveness of sin is an impossibility. Now, here's what I want to point out. The word identification is the key word here. When we talk about identity all the time, right? Without the identification of man with his aim. So our identity with that goal, with having that aim or goal accomplished, unless we can identify with already being that person, there is no redo and hitting the mark. We're still going to miss the mark. So if I'm still being the woman that has the podcast that only has a handful of listeners, I won't be the woman that has the podcast that has 10,000 listeners. As long as my identity is still the woman that wrote a book that didn't sell, I can't be the woman that wrote the bestseller.
Yeah, they are. So, they're kind of mutually exclusive, aren't they?
Well, this is the whole idea with identity and being able to step into that identity. It's also the reason why, I've told this story before, and I always think it bears repeating. I've had people bring it up to me because they've heard me tell it, and it made an impact on them. But it was the story of a woman that I had spoke with because she was considering hiring me. And I was very excited to start working with her. She was excited to start working with me. And we were going to have a conversation about working together. And the morning of our conversation, she got laid off from her job.
Oh, wow.
Totally unexpected. Like she did not see that coming. So of course that was a real downer,
Yeah.
And we get on the phone together. And in the first 10 or 15 minutes of our call, she started telling me, I said, "Oh my goodness, well that's awful. I'm very sorry to hear this, that you've lost your job. I mean, aside the fact of whether you were going to hire me or not, I'm not concerned about that. But what do you have a plan in place?" She said, "Oh, I'm going to be fine because I'm a survivor." And I said, "Okay." Whoa. I thought, well, she sounds pretty, she sounds like she's going to be okay. And then she started telling me, "Look, I know how these happen. Things in life happen." And she starts telling me all of these things that she has gone through. Incredible things I would not want to hear anyone have to go through. Not, a divorce and cancer, but also like being kidnapped, like all these things that's wow. Like, whoa, these are big major things. And the list was never ending. And after each one she told me, she said, "But I'm a survivor. I'm a survivor." And all of a sudden it hit me that this person was so identified with being a survivor that I had this sense that, well, the universe can do nothing but just keep bringing her continually experiences she has to survive.
Yeah, she would have been better off if she'd said, "I was a thriver," rather than a survivor.
So that was one of the first times I already had this teaching about identity from some early mentors that I had, from Neville, from different people. And I recognized it in my own life that until I was willing to step into that identity of the person that had the thing I already wanted, had it already, then it was going to not be a road to get there if I was still the person that didn't have it in my identity. And so when I read that yesterday, it kind of just struck me. Without the identification of man with his aim, the forgiveness of sin is an impossibility. So Neville uses a lot of this very religious type language, and he's talking about a redo here. He's talking about hitting the mark instead of missing the mark.
Yeah.
So I thought it was worth bringing up because as we read through his stuff, he inevitably will use other phrases like that.
Well, yeah, he does. No, well, you're right. You're right. And the thing about this aim concept, the thing I thought of as soon as you said aim, as soon as you said the word aim, was pointing to. Mm-hmm. You're kind of like, if you're aiming to hit a basket with a basketball, right? You're pointing to it. In fact, that's what they teach you when you're shooting. They have you finish off with your hand pointing toward the basket, right where you want it to go. So if your aim is off, so that you're missing, you're redirecting your aim. You're re-aiming, so to speak, and that's critical. Yeah, if you aren't aiming in the right direction, the ball's not going to go in the basket. That's just basic. You have to be aiming in the right direction.
Right.
So changing your aim is the thing to do when you're not hitting the mark.
And identifying with it.
Yes. That's what it means.
Being the person who just made the three-pointer.
In fact, that's also what a good basketball shooter does. And I say this as somebody who was never really good at shooting baskets, but that also comes with not having good eyesight. But for those who are, blessed with good eyesight and can actually shoot baskets, they shoot baskets continuously. I mean, it's one practice shot after another. Last night, Louise and I were watching a recording of an old HBO special about Magic Johnson and Larry Bird called Magic and Bird. And, the two of them were talking about all the different ways they were competing with each other, including checking out what each other had done in the previous game, on the newspaper. And, I'll bet you he shot 500 shots today. I only shot 250. Well, that's because they're so committed to their competitive effort that they want to get into the place where shooting that basket is the thing that their body knows how to do. It's like muscle memory, right?
Yes.
And when it's in muscle memory, you are now in the mode of, yes, I'm sinking the basket. I'm sinking the basket. I'm sinking the basket. It's not like you're trying to get there. You're already there in your mind and you're already there in your muscles. So but the next time you have to go up for a shot in the middle of a game, you're just going right back into, I'm putting the ball in the basket. There's no doubt about it.
And that's that identity part.
Right.
There's no doubt at all. They've already way surpassed that point of like wondering if they're really good at what they do, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Right. They are great basketball players and they identify with that. But there had to be at some point when they weren't yet. And yet I'm imagining anyway, I can see it, that they envisioned it, that they acted the part, that they identified with being a star athlete.
Oh yeah. Well, that was actually part of the special because Magic Johnson, the narrator talks about how I guess they interviewed his mother, and from like the age of 5, he had already mapped out his entire life. He was going to be a star basketball player, followed by being a successful businessman, which is exactly what he became. But he had it mapped out from age 5. There was no doubt in his mind. That combined with the fact, you're going to love this, he was the happiest kid on the face of the earth. Now, he didn't live in wealth or anything like that. He came from an impoverished situation, but he was just a happy kid. He was happy all the time. That's one of the things he was known for. He had this infectious personality. It was one of the differences that they describe when comparing him to Larry Bird. Larry Bird's very introverted. If they're going out after a game, there's a front door where there's all the crowd and there's a side door that escapes the crowd. Larry Bird would go out the side door. Magic would go flying right out the front door just because of who their personalities were. Yeah.
Right.
And Magic said, and I respect that about him. I'll help him find the side door. But the point is, with magic, it was all about, life, let's go. I mean, you put that combination together with his dream from age 5 of being a successful basketball player and then a successful businessman. How could he have failed?
Well, my guess is that a lot of that, and I realize some people are more extroverted, some people are more introverted, but my guess is that the happiness factor and exuberance, that part of that was probably because he was doing exactly what we're talking about today, and that is he was seeing things from the end. He was living in the success already.
Absolutely.
I mean, because when you're 5 years old, that's fairly, well, I want to say it's a little bit easier sometimes, or at least seems it, right? When we're 5 years old, we use our imagination all the time, because so many things we can't do yet. So we can't drive a car yet when we're 5.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't be a star basketball player usually yet when we're 5, right? But we pretend.
Yeah.
We pretend we're flying a plane and driving a car and driving a train and playing in a star basketball game. And our imaginations are just on fire when we're that little. And so when we're living in that place where I can imagine that he was assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled all the time.
I think he was. And in fact, he was so consumed by it. This one will blow your mind. He was so consumed by it that by the time he got to high school, he was actually one of those kids who got bused. Remember, busing to integrate the schools was a big thing back in the 60s and 70s. He was one of those kids who got bused. And he got bused to what was previously an all-white school. And he went through this was his first exposure to, racial tensions and discrimination. And in his words, all the black kids hung out together and excluded the white kids. All the white kids hung out together and excluded the black kids. But he himself just never really bought into that. He just kind of saw through the whole thing. So he actually had 2 different circles. He had his circle of black friends and his circle of white friends. He even tells a story about how his white friends invited him to a kegger one time. He said, "What's a kegger?" And they said, "Well, it's where we get a keg of beer and we just get it on and have fun." And he says, "Okay, I'll go to the kegger. What time's the kegger?" And he says, with us, our usual time for starting a party was like 10 or 11 at night. They said, "Well, the kegger's at 7. He says, 7? But, he just broke down all those racial barriers, and I think he did it for the reason that you're describing. He was so consumed by his final result, he didn't care what was going on. In fact, this is the part that's going to blow your mind. When there was some kind of a racial thing going on, maybe a fight was going on or something like that, the principal would ask him to come to the office to calm the fight down. That's how well respected he was within the school. He could actually break up a racially driven fight. And I'm thinking, wow.
Yeah. What a great story.
Yeah. Talk about, now that's what you could do when you focus on the end and you're not focusing on how you're going to get there. Because if he had focused on how he was going to get there, no way he was going to be able to do that.
Right? So you just gave us like a whole handful of examples of focusing on the end result instead of how.
Yeah.
Just in one person's life.
Just one person.
Yeah. It's amazing. So I wanted to kind of dive in chapter 2. I am skipping around a little bit, but just starting with this one sentence that's exactly what we're talking about. Determined imagination, thinking from the end, is the beginning of all miracles.
Yeah.
Right? It's like so simple. I'm going to read a little further here. He says, "I would like to give you an immense belief in miracles. But a miracle is only the name given by those who have no knowledge of the power and function of imagination to the works of imagination."
Oh boy, that's a good quote. That's
imagining oneself into the feeling of the wish fulfilled is the means by which a new state is entered. This gives the state the quality of isness.
Isness.
Isness. I like that word. He hyphenated it. Hermes tells us that which is manifested. That which has been or shall be is unmanifested, but not dead. For soul, the eternal activity of God, animates all things. The future must become the present in the imagination of one who would wisely and consciously create circumstances.
And I'm realizing there's a lot of code in that Hermes quote, especially that first sentence.
That which is manifested. That which has been or shall be is unmanifested. Just that right there, right? Because right before this, we hear imagining oneself into the feeling of the wish fulfilled is the means by which a new state is entered. This gives the state the quality of isness.
Yeah.
Right? Isness. This gives the state. So when we imagine ourselves into the feeling of that wish fulfilled, we enter a new state. And this state, the quality of isness, that which is manifested.
And the rest of that sentence, the last part of that sentence that you just started there, that which is manifested, that which has been or shall be is unmanifested but not dead. And then, for soul, the eternal activity of God animates all things. I really heard those last three words. Animates all things. There's a lot of ways you can understand that, but the two ways that jump to my mind are, first of all, the concept that source energy is in everything. And source energy is life.
Right.
And then the second thing that comes to my mind is another way of describing animation is movement. In other words, it moves all things. In other words, the law of attraction is able to deliver it because it can move.
I mean, the phrase that came into my mind when we read that sentence the first time was, it brings it to life.
Yes. Yes.
That which is manifested. That which has been or shall be is unmanifested, but not dead. It means it can happen. I love this stuff.
The soul animates all things. We don't think of souls as being in things most of the time. This is another Goddard heresy, I guess. But we don't think of it that way normally. And yet, what an interesting way of thinking about stuff. Soul, or source energy, or whatever you want to call it, animates all things.
One of my favorite quotes is from Sue Monk Kidd, who is an author. She wrote The Secret Life of Bees.
Oh, yeah.
And one of my favorite quotes is she was asked, what does the soul do? And she said, the soul does two things. It loves and it creates.
Nice.
And that really resonated with me, that idea that when we are loving and when we are creating, and whether it's creating with our hands or creating with our consciousness, I believe that's the work of the soul.
Yeah, I think you're right.
All right, so let's keep going here. The future must become the present in the imagination of the one who would wisely and consciously create circumstances.
That's it. That's what we're all trying to do anyway.
That's it.
When we first discover law of attraction, I know that's the first thought that comes into most of our heads. Like, okay, I know where I want to be. How do I get us there now? I want to make that future become my present. Right.
And the next three words are how that happens, or where that happens, right? In the imagination.
Yeah. That's it.
We must translate vision into being. Interesting that the word being is capitalized.
Yes.
We must translate vision into being, thinking of into thinking from.
I want to stop on that one too, because he uses this distinction of the two prepositions of and from numerous times. And I want to ask you, what do you think of as being the significant difference here? When he says thinking of, that to him is the place of not being the thing, not living and experiencing and imagining the thing, whereas thinking from is where he's imagining it, and the thing in this case is the end result.
Right. So I like this example just because to me it's obvious and easy, but just think of the idea, and because I'm a writer, so think of the idea that I am getting ready to write a book, or maybe I've written this book. I really want this book to be a bestseller.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm thinking of my book becoming a bestseller, I'm still back here, the person that doesn't have a bestseller. I'm thinking of my book being a bestseller. But if I let myself go over there where my book is a bestseller, and I think from that place, and I think what it would be like, but I bring it to the place where it is, where I am experiencing that feeling. I'm assuming the feeling of my wish of being a bestseller or having a bestseller selling book. I'm assuming that feeling now. It's totally different. I mean, I can feel it in my body when I talk about it.
Okay. So of is more of like an objective viewpoint, whereas from is living it.
We could interchange the word of there for the word about.
Okay.
Right? Thinking about it. We have to change thinking about success into thinking from the place of being successful already.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's good. That's good.
So it's sort of like I said to you yesterday, we were talking about this same idea, and we were talking about the idea of what does it mean to be in a state, a particular state.
Mm-hmm.
And I made the joke that I had told a friend of mine that said she wanted to be a well-funded retiree. I said, okay, so what does a well-funded retiree, or how? I like the question how better. How does a well-funded retiree drink her coffee? How does a well-funded retiree, throw those towels into the dryer? I mean, these are like a lot of times when people especially when people are wanting to create wealth.
Yeah, I was chuckling just then because you used the word how, and we had just a few minutes ago talked about the horrible hows, which is where we're trying to figure out how to get to someplace. But in this case, how was being kind of turned on its ear. And that's why I was laughing at it.
Yeah, I'm using it as a state, as to point to a state of being.
Well, not only that, it was to an ideal state of being. In other words, you weren't using how as how to get there at all. I mean, not even close to that.
Right. I'm using it in how would we be if we were there already. And the reason why, a lot of times when people are in a situation where they want to create more money, or they feel they need to create more money because things are tight, or they don't have the resources to have the experience they want in life, they get tangled up here with this. Well, I can't pretend like I'm already rich, because all they can think of is that, well, what do rich people do? Well, they spend money, and that's just not true.
No.
Right? I mean, wealthy people do the same things that people in poverty do. I'm not saying that they don't have the resources to do much more and bigger and, have an easier life. That's not the point I'm making. But I'm saying we all probably drink a cup of coffee or tea or water sometime in our day.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And we all may do mundane chores like, I just spilled coffee grounds on the floor, so now I need to sweep them up. It's like even people that have housekeeping services still do some things like that when they need to, right? Mm-hmm. So we can say these things that I have to do today, these kind of mundane tasks. How does a best-selling author wash her hair?
Yeah.
Because what that question does, open-ended questions cause the right brain to fire up. And that's the imaginative part of us. It's the part that transcends that logical left brain part, right? And so when we ask a question like, how would I do this? How does a best-selling author sit in the chair? It causes our brain to ask our body that question, and we change the state that we're in. And when we are in a different state, we experience a different feeling. And this is what we're going for. We're going for the feeling of the wish fulfilled.
Yes. In fact, I told Louise last night about what you'd said during yesterday's podcast along this line about how to visualize something we've never experienced before. And that it's really just visualizing and feeling and experiencing in your own mind things that you already know how to experience. And in doing that, also associating, kind of bridging in a sense, associating with, oh, and by the way, I also have a bunch of money. It's the same feeling. It's just applied in a different situation. And that we can all do. Any of us can do that because we have the background. We have the experience for that. So that's within reach.
Yeah, and to me, that's what makes it so doable.
Exactly.
If we'll just take the time and the effort to focus there. Okay, so where do we leave off here?
I think we're on the line that says thinking from the state desired is creative living. And when we're getting to that line, the first thought that came to my mind was it's true, but I'd also like to say thinking and feeling from the state desired is creative living.
Right. And I noticed as we move forward, whether we get there today or later today or tomorrow or whenever we get there, but he gets more, because you were saying yesterday, well, I want him to talk more about the feeling part. He's skipping over it. But I was reading ahead. I was like, oh no, he goes deep into that. So, thinking from the state desired is creative living.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking from the state desired. I'm already here. I'm thinking from this point. I'm thinking from the perspective of someone who already has the bestseller, who already has 100,000 podcast listeners, who already has the money that I want to have, who already has whatever it is, who already has the relationship, who already has the level of health, whatever it is, we're thinking from that state. And the more you can do it, the better.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because as soon as we're not thinking from that state, we're thinking from another state. And it may be the state where we're in lack of that thing we want.
It usually is, actually, now that I think about it, because so often, so many of us, our thought patterns are dominated by the stuff we don't like that's going on around us or in our lives.
Right. See, it says ignorance of this ability to think from the end is bondage. It is the root of all bondage with which man is bound. To passively surrender to the evidence of the senses underestimates the capacities of the inner self.
And that's so true. Because
and that's just what you just said.
Yeah. And it's so easy to stay there, too. I mean, because that's where most of us stay most of our lives. The challenge isn't staying there. The challenge is breaking free of it by shifting our thought patterns.
Once man accepts thinking from the end as a creative principle in which he can cooperate, then he is redeemed from the absurdity of ever attempting to achieve his objective by merely thinking of it.
Yeah.
Let's do that
one again. That one's interesting. Okay. Once man accepts thinking from the end as a creative principle in which he can cooperate, then he is redeemed from the absurdity of ever attempting to achieve his objective by merely thinking of it. And the merely was the part that stopped me until I realized what he's saying is, it isn't merely thinking about it, it's thinking about it from the end. If you think of it just without from the end, you're in the wrong place.
I think I mentioned this recently to you. I don't know if it was on the podcast or not, but something that I had written about, this wishing capacity of ours is a commitment phobe.
Yes.
And what I meant by that is this right here, right? By merely thinking of it, just thinking about it, instead of thinking from it as an accomplished fact. We can wish for things all day long. And I know Neville uses the word wish, and I'm okay with that. But he uses it because he's talking about assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled.
Yes.
And this wishing part, this, absurdity of ever attempting to achieve our objectives just by thinking about them or thinking of them is the same to me as those wishes that don't really have any weight because we don't put any time, effort, thought into actually creating them. Yeah. We just go, oh, I wish I had that. Right? Oh, look at that pretty thing. Oh, I'd like to have one of those. And then we never think about it again. That's not creative in itself. But when I decide I really do want that thing and I'm going to start thinking and feeling as if it was already here, how would I feel if I already had it? That's a whole different story.
It is. And it really clarifies something that I can't remember if you and I have talked about it, but I've talked about it with a number of people here on the podcast. The idea of the difference between a wish and a want, where a wish is, it's sort of, I wish I had a car. I wish I had a Jaguar. That'd be great. I wish I had a Mercedes. I wish I had a Lexus. I wish I had, but it's not like a serious thing. Because
wishy-washy.
it's wishy-washy. Yeah, it's exactly what it is. It's wishy-washy. There's nothing actually behind it. But when you wish it from the end, from already being in possession of it, that's a different kind of thing. That's much more in line with what we normally call a want. It's like, I want that. I want that thing, and I'm thinking about it from the end, from the point of I've got it. I already have it. I already own it, and I'm feeling that, and I'm experiencing that. Entirely different kind of thing.
I think about when I was, well, I really like German cars, and I'm one of these people that's probably people will hear this and go, what a weirdo, but I like to wash my own car. I like to clean the wheels. I like to wax the car. I don't know why. I put my iPod in and I've got my music and I like to do it. I know a lot of people are like, oh, and they just drive their cars, but I never want to drive my car through one of those drive-through things because I think it hurts the paint. So I really, really love it.
I love it. That's great.
So if I'm thinking from the end, and let's say I don't have a car right now and I'm wanting to have this new car. I'm thinking from the end for me, I may spend some time, with my eyes closed, imagining driving it, but I also may be imagining washing it.
Yeah,
I may imagine how slippery that sponge feels going across the soapy sponge. I may smell what the wax smells like when I'm putting it on the car. Yeah. I'm listening to whatever music I'm listening to in my iPod as I get the car all washed. And, those are the kind of things and you can do that in your imagination, even if you've never owned, the super wonderful car yet. Maybe, I don't know. I want to say, hasn't everybody at least washed a car once? Maybe not. But, so whatever part of it that you like, you can imagine those things and get all your senses involved. To me, that's the easiest way to feel the wish fulfilled, is to get all the senses involved.
So yet another way to be in that feeling from the end or thinking from the end place, especially with something that we have not yet previously experienced, like being a millionaire, for instance. If we've never experienced being a millionaire, well, one of the things to do is not only to think and feel from that end place, but to imagine, what are the parts I would like best? And then, okay, imagine I have that. And then play that out like you just did. You like the idea. You love the idea of washing your own car. Well, shoot, you can imagine that. Even if you don't have a car, you can imagine that one.
Or here's another thing that I think is fun. And it's an identity thing. And I've done this lots of times. And that is, okay, I can't think of who it is. I was reading an article and it was a famous billionaire. And I don't remember who it was. Okay. Somebody in the financial sector.
Okay.
And the story about him was that he ate, I want to say, fast food. I don't know what fast food. I don't know if it was maybe McDonald's, but in other words, he ate the dollar meal, for lunch or whatever. Mm-hmm. He never spent more than a couple dollars on lunch.
Oh, I see. Mm-hmm.
Even as a billionaire, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, we're hearing this story about this person because that's part of his identity. Mm-hmm. If you knew him and you were great friends with him and I said, well, tell me something about this guy. You would be like, well, he's a billionaire. Yeah. And he always is in bed by 9:00 and you might not believe it with all of his wealth, but he eats the dollar lunch menu meal. He never spends more than a couple dollars for lunch. And he loves to wear the color gray. He's always in a gray suit, gray tie. Okay. So you've just you're telling me the things you notice about this person.
Right.
And besides the fact that you said to me, he's a billionaire, not anybody could do any of those things.
Right.
Pretty much. Right. I can go to bed by 10. I can wear gray. I can eat the fast food for lunch if I want to.
That's
and
true.
So what I've done many times in my life when I've wanted to create something is that I've built an identity around that thing. When I wanted to write a best-selling book, I created an identity around it. I said, okay, well, what will I be like? How can I step into this person, that's this best-selling author? Mm-hmm. And I just added some details like that and started doing them. So I stepped right into that identity.
Anyone who's ever attempted to learn how to be a better marketer, to market something, usually somebody who's an entrepreneur wants to market their product or service, anyone who's ever explored that in any detail in the last few years probably got exposed to the idea of selling to the target market, or what is often called to the avatar. And the way that works is, it isn't just you identify something about, what does your collection of buyers have in common. You actually try to build up a persona. You try to build up, like you're saying, you try to build up the entire picture of who that buyer is. And you do that by describing all the things they're interested in. So just as you described a billionaire in all these terms that really had nothing to do with being a billionaire, you describe your ultimate buyer in all these terms that really have nothing to do with them buying whatever it is you're buying, whatever it is you're selling. You just describe them as who they are. And if you can build that up deeply enough, now you have somebody to write to speak to talk to anytime that you're putting out any of your messages.
Right. So I use this same kind of technique, but I do it with myself, and I decide who I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And what does that look like? And a lot of times it has to do with really simple things that aren't about a huge investment of money. They're just what I'm going to do. It may be a particular kind of clothes. It might be a particular color of lipstick or nail polish. It might be, what I do with my day. It's all kinds of things. It's everything, but it's exactly that's a perfect example of an avatar.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that with my last book. And I think it helps me live from the end, because I'm already there. I'm already doing the things I would be doing.
It's a great point. I mean, one of our listeners, I don't know why I always think of this, but I do. One of our listeners called in one day and told us that he listens to us while he rides on his tractor. And from that day to this, that's one of the things. I know all of our listeners don't ride tractors, but in my mind, I'm thinking very often when I'm talking to a listener, I'm talking to the listener who's riding in his tractor.
That's so great. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is something that I'm kind of just like putting a bug in your ear about living from the end,
mm-hmm.
and about how we do that. We can do it, all the time in the way that I'm speaking of. It's like developing what that looks like and just stepping into it. And then also we can do it in kind of meditative segments where we actually are taking a period of time and shutting our eyes. And Neville's going to talk about this when we get there. Falling asleep. He talks about he has the method of assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled as we're falling asleep. And we know from the story we read yesterday that that's what he did when he wanted to go to Barbados, to be with his family. He grew up there. His father had a house there. So he knew the house. He knew the bed. He could imagine himself falling asleep in that bed, in Barbados. And that was apparently a very important part of the method for him getting there.
Makes sense. I mean, it's what he knew best, and it was most familiar, and it was a strong memory, and it was one that he had a positive association with. So yeah, you include that. That's how you.
Plus, it's really easy, right? Because everybody's going to fall asleep.
Right.
So once again, we're not talking about something that we can't do. We're talking about things we are going to do every day.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that's important.
I think it is too. And that was one of the things that struck me yesterday about why he was so successful in manifesting those steamship tickets, was because he came from Barbados. He knew what life was like there. He knew what the ocean smelled like, and he knew what the sun felt like on his back or on his face, from its angle in the sky. And he knew what the people were like, and he knew what his bed felt like, and he knew what his home felt like. He knew what his family were like. And he just relived all of that and made it into his now.
Yeah, and I imagine all the senses being involved.
Yes.
Like whatever it sounded like there. Yeah. I don't know what sounds he could hear when he would lay in his bed in his childhood home, but we can imagine what they were. So, and that's always my answer too, is use the imagination when you think you don't know something.
Mm-hmm. And use the imagination on something that you already know something about.
Right.
Something that's familiar, something that you can latch onto that feels good.
We have so much knowledge, right? I mean, we experience things 24/7. We're always experiencing things with our senses. So definitely we can pull out a few consciously and at will when we want to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled.
Yeah, isn't that ironic? We have this huge database of experiences to draw upon, and yet the first question that enters our mind is, well, what do I imagine?
Right? Construct all ends according to the pattern of fulfilled desire.
Mm.
I just love that sentence.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we're talking about.
Exactly, yeah.
The whole of life is just the appeasement of hunger. And the infinite states of consciousness from which a man can view the world are purely a means of satisfying that hunger. The principle upon which each state is organized is some form of hunger to lift the passion for self-gratification to ever higher and higher levels of experience. Desire is the mainspring of mental machinery. It's a blessed thing. It is a right and natural craving which has a state of consciousness as its right and natural satisfaction. I really like that.
Yeah.
And I think, nature, it's nature's nature to expand. I mean, anyone that's grown a garden can see that, right?
This is true.
Everything. And so we too, as humans, part of our nature is to want more, is to want to create, is to want to do more, to be more, to have more, to learn more. I mean, if you learn something and you really learn it well, most of the time you'll want to go further and then learn something else or learn more about it. I mean, even in our mental state, I think we are constantly wanting to expand our knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And so that makes sense that we have everything we need to create whatever it is that we're desiring, because all we need is imagination.
It's true. One of the things we talked about yesterday, and it's a topic that kind of still hangs in the back of my mind, and I'm thinking about it now as you're describing what you're describing about how everything expands and grows, is the concept of state. And we kind of started today's show talking a little bit about that too, because state is usually like a slice in time, so to speak. So it's like a static photograph. And it seems kind of strange that in the midst of all this expanding and growing, we're aiming for something that's static. But what I realized just now as you were reading that was the only reason it's static is that it's a milepost. Like on a trip, along a highway, there are mileposts along the way, and they tell you how far you've gotten to. Well, each one of these states is a milepost. And the next state that we're aiming for is a milepost further down the road that we want to be at. And once we get there, we can envision the next state. We can keep going state after state after state. Kind of like going through the United States. You can go after state after state after state. You just keep changing states. And when I understand it that way, now it makes a lot more sense to me. Because I was stuck on the idea that a state is static. That's where the word static comes from state. And how could it be
that's
static?
Interesting. Yeah, because I never think of it that way. Well, I think of a state that the state that we are in is often the state we carry with us, but it can be fluid. We can change it.
Yes.
This addresses that. I'm going to read a little bit here as we wind up. I know we're getting close to the end of the podcast.
We got about 6.5 minutes left, so we're in good shape.
All right. So we must move mentally from thinking of the end to thinking from the end. This reason could never do. By its nature, it is restricted to the evidence of the senses. Mm-hmm. But imagination, having no such limitation, can.
Yes.
Desire exists to be gratified in the activity of imagination. Through imagination, man escapes from the limitation of the senses and the bondage of reason. There's no stopping the man who can think from the end. Nothing can stop him. He creates the means and grows his way out of limitation into ever greater and greater mansions of the Lord, he says. It does not matter what he has been or what he is. All that matters is, what does he want?
Boy, that draws that in a way that I had never really kind of pieced together. Because all of us know the feeling of, I want something. What do you want? I know what I want. I want something. But how many of us want that thing thinking from the end? Not many of us.
He knows that the world is a manifestation of the mental activity which goes on within him. So now remember, we're talking about the person that's mastered this, right?
Right.
We were talking about there's no stopping the man that can think from the end. Nothing can stop him. He creates the means and grows his way out of limitation into ever greater and greater mansions of the Lord. I love that he uses that phrase. It's so funny.
Why is that?
It does not matter what he has been or what he is. All that matters is, what does he want? He knows that the world is a manifestation of the mental activity which goes on within himself. So he strives to determine and control the ends from which he thinks. In his imagination, he dwells in the end, confident that he shall dwell there in the flesh also. He puts his whole trust in the feeling of the wish fulfilled and lives by committing himself to that state. For the art of fortune is to tempt him so to do.
Well, that's really convoluted writing there, but now that we've been looking at it in depth, it makes some sense. But I listen to that phrase, the art of the fortune is to tempt him so to do, and I think to myself, what the bleep are you talking about?
Well,
but in the context of what we're talking about, it actually starts to make sense.
Yeah. That's the thing that draws him. Is, what does he want? Because he knows that all he has to do is put his whole trust in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. And he lives by committing himself to that state. That state that is the feeling of the wish fulfilled. So I talked, do I have a minute?
Yeah, you got about 2 minutes actually.
I told the story about when my little dog was dying. I know this sounds so sad, but that I knew that there would never be enough like cuddling I could do with her. Like, you know, if I cuddled her for every moment she had of her life left, which was a short time, it just wouldn't be enough. So one day I just decided I was going to memorize it, and I picked her up and I snuggled her, and what she smelled like, what her fur felt like. I made sure that I seared that memory into my mind so that when she was gone, I would still be able to remember snuggling on her that way. And I still can. Like you were talking about muscle memory. Yeah. I can still feel what she felt like when I would hold her. And so it's interesting because that's what we need to do with this. Once we assume the feeling, we need to really let it sear into us so that we can have it with us all the time and be committed to that state. Very
good. Yeah. Because that's really the key right there. That is actually visualization as it should be done. I mean, we hear about visualization. We hear about vision boards, right? And we hear about, visualize every day, or visualize by journaling or all that kind of thing. But what you're really describing there is true visualization, where it becomes a visceral experience to revisit that visualization.
Yeah, it's not just sight.
Right.
Right? It's like all the senses.
Yeah.
And we can feel it. Exactly.
That's key. And I think that's what confuses all of us with the word visualize. That visual refers to one sense, seeing. But it really means all five senses in the way that we're using it when we describe visualizing. So we've got about 30 seconds left, so I don't think we can go too much farther with the book. I hope we're going to continue with it during the afternoon podcast, and probably...
I would love to.
Yeah, let's do it for a few more until we go through the whole thing, because this is good. It's got good stuff, and it's worth exploring. Yeah. Before we leave, how does somebody reach out to you for personal help? Because sometimes you need a little personal help that's kind of offline and out of public light and all that kind of thing.
Well, they can reach me at cindiechavez.com, CindieChavez. And you can use my contact form or email me at cindy@cindiechavez.com. just reach out, say hello.
All right. Well, I'm going to reach out and say hello to you this afternoon. Looking forward to it.
I'll be back.
And we hope that you're going to be back as well next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.